session. So I think we are just about ready to roll. So Jeff, would you like to get us started off?
Sure. Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you all for joining us wherever you are, wherever you're sitting, whatever circumstances you're in, under these very strange pandemic situation all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us. We're the Department of Global Communications Civil Society Unit, and we're organizing a series of workshops. This is the first one, together with our partners, who I'm extremely grateful to. Our partners are the Global NGO Executive Committee and the American Counseling Association, International Council of Nurses, Medical Women's International Association, NGO Committee on Education and Learning and Literacy, Akshar Foundation. We are really grateful that all of you are with us because we want to do some learning together about sort of how the communications landscape is changing, and talking about tools and techniques that we can use to improve our communications, and also how to navigate social issues so that we can really be effective communicators. And you know, we're not here to only learn from experts and to tell you about what the UN is doing, but we're also very much here to listen and learn from you. As I said, this is the first in a series of workshops about communications, and how we design the next workshops is very much going to depend on what we hear from you today. So please be vocal, please tell us what you're experiencing. We are really listening. So obviously we're all in an unprecedented situation right now. All of us at the UN working from home and facing so many challenges. For the Department of Global Communications, I think our focus is the fact that we are fighting really two pandemics. We're fighting this deadly coronavirus, and we're fighting a very dangerous pandemic of misinformation. So to fight misinformation, our department is really working hard to create platforms to support civil society and the general public at large. One is through something called shareverified.com. And if you have not heard of it, please visit shareverified.com. And what it is asking you to become an information volunteer and share verified information. Recently, for example, a focus has been to ask folks around the world to pause and take care before you share information. And the idea is that so much information and misinformation, incorrect information, dangerous information and divisive information is shared in that impulse moment when someone perhaps is feeling anxious or angry or happy, that they feel like they you know, perhaps have a solution to share to keep their loved ones safe or their friends. But many times it's incorrect information, as we know. So this is designed to have people think and sort of interrupt that impulse sharing moment, so that less of that misinformation goes out. Have them think about, you know, the source of the information. Example, when is the information actually from, etc. And finally, we in our unit have really been working to highlight the role of civil society. I cannot think of a single civil society organization, a single NGO in the world, and I know all of you are in the exact same boat, at least I think so, that has not become a part of this global response. Whatever you were doing 6 months ago is probably very different now, but you're still active and very much a part of the global response. And we're learning a lot from NGOs around the world, and also very excited to see how many NGOs are using WHO guidelines to inform their activities in the field. So we are both you know, excited that we're able to share that information and share what the UN is doing around the world, but also learn from civil society and NGOs around the world, including young people who are doing some incredible things. So, you know, from us, a big thank you. We are listening. And as I said, we're going to learn from the conversation, develop the upcoming communications workshops. So join us for those as well. But we really look forward to today. And without saying anything further, I'd like to hand it over to Fanny Munlin, who's the chair of the Global NGO Executive Committee. So thank you all, and over to Fanny.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to this communications workshop. I want to tell you a bit about the Global NGO Executive Committee. We have been working with the UN on conferences and workshops for over 68 years, and we do these workshops every year. And the purpose of the workshops is to help us as NGOs to effectively communicate our programs and with the people that we work to help and to move forward. We have done a great job in that, and we continue to know that communications is very key to what we do, and particularly now in these difficult times when we are accustomed to meeting face-to-face and in person. This is a challenge for us, and I think we can meet this challenge very well by distancing ourselves, and we'll learn new techniques and how we're going to go about implementing our programs. I am very happy to be part of this, and very happy that Richard and Holly, our chair, brought this program to fruition. I know we will learn a lot about communicating, and you know the word is the power with which we get things done. And I know that we will share what we are doing as NGOs. The goal is to make sure that we implement all 17 Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And if we keep on the track that we're following now, I think we can accomplish that goal as a unit. And NGOs working together is the key to success for all that we do, and particularly it is the key to successfully implementing all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And with that, I welcome you all, and I look forward to an informative, invigorating, and inspiring workshop. Thank you. Holly, over to you.
Thank you, Fanny. I'm Dr. Holly Shaw. I am the representative of the International Council of Nurses, and I've had the pleasure of serving on the Global NGO Executive Committee for several terms, and working with my colleague, Richard Yep, who's the CEO of the American Counseling Association, in preparing this very exciting series to address some of the current challenges as well as opportunities in communication. Just to give you a brief view of how our program is going to work, we're thrilled that we have a truly global audience with participants from North America, from Europe, from Africa, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Morocco, India, and we've really tried hard to reach out to all of our civil society colleagues throughout the world. We're going to start off with the nuts and bolts, kind of basic brass tacks of communicating, especially during these really extraordinary circumstances. And we'll go until 10:45. We'll then have a 15-minute break, and we'll begin again at 11, focusing on a particular aspect of communication. And we're very excited about that because this was really grounded in the current conflicts and controversies about underlying systemic problems that affect us globally. The backdrop is really the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that spells out in elegant, specific language the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, which is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. So in our session 2, we're going to have conversations about how to address some of these really difficult and challenging issues that confront us in every part of the world. And we're delighted to have participants who are going to share with us experience from India, from Africa, and from the United States. Right now, I'd like to turn the program over to Richard Yep. and enjoy this part of our very exciting program.
Thank you, Holly. I appreciate that. And good morning, everyone. I want to let you know that, as Holly said, the first part of today's workshop is going to focus specifically on tools and techniques of effective communications for NGOs. And today we're going to focus on the word effective. To be effective, the communication platform needs to meet various criteria for each NGO. Cost, staff, basic communication techniques, but it all leads to engagement and commitment. And that's something that we think social media can play a huge part in. And the reason why I say that is when you think about it, many of us on today's call use social media in our personal lives, our professional lives, each and every day. So in terms of whether anyone is on social media, we just need to look at ourselves or our phones or our iPads or our computers. With a built-in base of those who utilize social media, it makes it clear that our communication success must include this component. And the amazing thing is that social media really is that great equalizer, right? It has lowered the cost to get your message out to people, thousands of people, instantaneously. There's no paying for printing, there's no paying for postage. It means that even with a very small staff or a group of volunteers with the right training and an understanding of communication strategy, you really can maximize the benefit that social media brings to enhancing and furthering the goals of your organization. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. But just as your organization does such good work for your constituency and how you can benefit from using tools like social media, we have to remember that there are other organizations who can use social media to promote things like hatred or discrimination or intolerance. And sometimes those terrible organizations may target your NGO, and then you have a crisis. So what do you do at that point? So this morning, we're going to talk about the role of communication strategy and specifically what social media can do to play in that space and advance your message and increase the support that you have and that others have for your organization. We'll share with you the rationale, but also a number of techniques and tips that any NGO, regardless of your size, can use to promote your messaging. And just a reminder, if you do have a question, use the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen there. That way we can try to answer your question as soon as we can. And if we can't get to it, we will follow up with you. So I'm very happy this morning to be presenting with my colleague, Katrina Lee. She is the public affairs strategist at my organization, the American Counseling Association. She has a vast amount of experience. I learn from her all the time. And so I think that we'll really have a great morning. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. Katrina?
Hello, good morning, everybody. Today, I'm very honored to be amongst you to talk about communications, especially during this time. Our learning plan for this first session will consist of quite a few things. We're going to try to get as much as we can in there for you. We're going to talk about what is social media. We're going to talk about the different options that NGOs have, the costs associated with those options. We're going to talk about how to best communicate using social medias. We're going to give you a little bit more information about how to plan a communication strategy and how to form a message for your NGO. We're also going to give you do's and don'ts for social media and a couple little other tricks and tips for you to start your social media journey. But at the start of this, we would like to take the pulse with everyone that's on the call with a poll question. We want to know, how often are you using social media? How many of you currently use social media? You should see the poll pop on your screen right now. If you can just check either yes, my organization uses social media, or no, my organization does not use social media. Once again, what we're trying to do is just take the pulse of who's on the call and your interaction with social media, just to make sure that our conversation today is meaningful for you. Okay, everyone probably have submitted their answers. Can we get the results? Wow, good. It looks like most of you definitely use social media. 95% of you use social media. And for the 5% of you who don't use social media, that is totally okay, because this session will cover how you can get started and some of the things you need to think through as you begin planning your social media journey for your organization. Next, we're gonna have Rich talk a little bit more about what is social media.
Thanks, Katrina. So social media, really, when you think about it, is something we've always done. It's just that now we have the opportunity to use the power of the internet, right, to help us enhance that message and make it louder. Social media is about what we all do: conversations, building community, connecting with audiences, and building relationships. It's not just a broadcast channel or a sales and marketing tool. It does much more than that. And because it's much more than that, and people are reading and listening to what you're posting, authenticity is key. Authenticity, honesty, open dialogue. Those are three things that I hope you'll remember. So social media is not only allows you to hear what people say about you, but it enables you to respond, right? So another tip: listen first, speak second. Be compelling and use relevant and engaging types of language. Don't be afraid to try new things, but think through your efforts before kicking them off. And that's the strategy part when it comes to using social media. It really is just a collective term for websites and applications that focus on communication and community-based input, interaction, content sharing, things like that. So something that's sort of interesting when we look at that collaboration, and then when we also move on to the fact that it really isn't just an add-on of some sort. You have to look at social media adoption. So in 2005, there might have been 5% of the people who were really using social media. And in 2011, we know that in the United States, 50% of all Americans were involved in social media. And last year, it was up to 72% of the public used some type of social media. So what I'm trying to stress is that it's important, as you look at what your strategy is going to be, to do the following: identify and understand the needs and motivations of different audiences and communities. Comprehend and leverage communication dynamics in various forms of media. You have to also create and analyze meaningful messages and texts. So it's great to just put something out there, but it really is important to think through what you want your reader, your supporter, your listener to get from that message. So crafting effective content and visuals is also a really important thing to do. And we'll go over some of these things as well. But I really wanted to just make sure that when we talk about social media, that it's okay to look at what other organizations are doing. That's how we learn. We learn from each other, right? So you may not have the type of staff and the amount of resources that a group like UNICEF might have, but it doesn't mean you can't craft a strategy based on social media that can still be really effective for what your organization is doing. So the things that I would say are really important is to establish what your message is. You've already done it if you have a strategic plan or if you have a mission statement. Then figure out what that branding and that overall message needs to be for those who support your organization. use social media to raise awareness of your organization or your cause, engage with larger audiences, and use it to sustain increase or support from donors and volunteers, public policymakers, those who will be helping you out. So I think, Katrina, are we moving to a second poll question?
Yes, we are. The second
All right.
question. It should be popping up on the screen at any moment. We want to know, how often does your organization post to social media? Next, 1 to 2 times per week, 3 to 5 times per week, or every day? How often does your organization post to social media? Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. Give you just a couple more seconds to respond. Okay, let's see what we have here. Let's see. Okay, not bad. It looks like at least 68% of us are posting to social media anywhere between 1 to 5 times per week. And there's a really nice number that's posting to social media every day. 27% of y'all post to social media every day, and 6% never. And that's in line with people who said from the first poll, who said that they either use social media or don't use social media. So that's really good. So now that we know how often you're using social media, Rich has given a great rundown of what social media is. I now want to talk about what options do NGOs have and how much do they cost. So organization, when it comes to your social media, is key. Using a social media management tool to manage your social media presence helps you to be more organized with the content you produce and the content you share. And if you're just starting out, here are a few free or freemium options that I would recommend to get you started. There are free options when it comes to these channels, even as you see on the screen. Hootsuite and Sprout Social, they are 2 of the top platforms out there to help you with your scheduling and your organizing of your content. Hootsuite does have a free service, but with the paid service, you get more customizable options, such as more templates, you get more publishing calendars, you have more access to your analytics, so you can track your success with social media. So just depending on where you are in your social media journey, you might want to try the free features first before you make that investment to go a little bit higher. TweetDeck is absolutely free. That's where you find all of your Twitter messages, your Twitter mentions, your Twitter your Twitter trending topics, all in one place. So scheduling and organizing are extremely important when it comes to managing your social media. And if you want, you can research. There are so many platforms that's out there on the market. I'm just giving you a couple of my chosen ones, if you will. When it comes to social media, also understand that having good images for your posts matter. When social media first started, it was all about just having words, as long as you had words up there. Now it has transformed into making sure that your words match your images. And so there are free software management tools to even help you with your images. So whether or not you have an in-house graphic designer, you can totally manage your social media presence on your own. I have worked as a freelance communications strategist for years, and I have always managed my clients' social media accounts completely on my own using these services. Canva, although there is a free feature with Canva, but when you pay more, you get more. So you get more customizable templates where you can just slide in your own image, slide in your own logo, slide in your own brand to kind of really make the post your own. And then there's a service called Unsplash, which is completely free and is filled with beautiful royalty-free photos that anyone can use, and you don't have to pay a single thing. So after you've tried several of these free social media management tools, please choose the one that works for you and your organization. Because although at ACA, we use Sprout Social and we pay for Sprout Social, that might not be where you and your organization is right now, and that's okay. Social media is definitely one of those things that no matter where you are in your social media journey, if you're just starting out or if you've been doing it for years, there's always room for you to grow. So just please keep that in mind. Now we're going to go into our next and last polling question. It should pop on your screen in just a second. What would you like to accomplish with your social media channels? So for those of you who don't have social media, but if you were wanting to get started with social media, what would you like to accomplish? If you already have social media, what would you like to accomplish? Is it to get more followers? Is it to expand your marketing and promotional opportunities? Is it just to build that digital presence and stay current? Is it to help increase awareness of your organization? All of the above or none of the above? Good. Now that we've had a moment to kind of answer that question, let's see where we all stand. All of the above. I love to see it. Absolutely. We should all be wanting to get more followers. We should all be wanting to expand our promotional opportunities and staying current and building that digital presence, especially in these times, because even more so than ever, digital is exactly where it's at. I mean, look at us right now. We're having to do this workshop virtually. So this is definitely the time, if you're not on social media, is to definitely figure out where your organization may line up when it comes to actually starting that social media journey. So I'm very happy to see that. So now that we know what you hope to accomplish with social media, I do want to talk a little bit about what is the best way to communicate when using Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Now, as you can see in real big and bold, there's let the data lead. At our organization, we lead by data. And I would encourage you, no matter where you are in your journey, make sure that you're always researching, make sure that you're always checking to see where these social media channels are lining up statistically. And I'll tell you why. So for LinkedIn, you definitely see that between 18 to 49 years of age, a lot of people are on LinkedIn. And if you go a little bit deeper, here are some statistics that will help you understand how to communicate using these channels. In 2019, LinkedIn was voted the most trusted network. That says a lot. So when it comes to your NGO, you definitely want to be on LinkedIn because it doesn't have the same rep as some of these other channels that are a lot of times called out for being, clickbaitish, too controversial, too many bots. You don't know who's who, what's what. Well, you don't really get that with LinkedIn. It is definitely one of the most trusted networks out there. So I would encourage you, if you are not on social media yet, start off with LinkedIn. It's very easy to start an account and get started. So you can kind of get your feet wet a little bit to see if it's something that you and your organization can do for the long term. Another really great thing about LinkedIn is that 80% of social media leads come from LinkedIn. And that is very true. I've seen it for our organization. Whenever we are promoting a conference, whenever we're promoting an event, when we post on LinkedIn, we definitely get a lot more engagement than when we post, say, on Twitter. And it definitely depends on the event and what we're promoting. But LinkedIn is a very great source for promoting things on via social media. Another great statistics to always be aware of when you're thinking about posting on these social media channels is when is the best time to post. Because as you know, social media, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of people vying for attention, a lot of organizations and business that's vying for attention. So that is why you have to be very informed on the statistical value of these channels. The best times to post on LinkedIn are Wednesdays from 9 to 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. That's not to say that you're not going to get any engagement at any other time, but if you're looking for the best bang for your non-buck, then those are the best times for you to post on LinkedIn. The next channel that I want to look at is Instagram. Yes, Instagram is one of my favorite. I can talk about Instagram for the rest of this session because of what we've been able to accomplish at ACA with Instagram just over the last year. Instagram, when you're looking at Instagram and when you're looking at some of these other social media channels, you definitely want to check out the demographics, which is why I have the demographic slide up here and not so many of the other ones. Because for ACA, we do have a membership base and we do have certain key demographics information from that membership base that we can look at and say, okay, well, we have 50% of our members are women. Where are the women on social media? Or we can look at it and say, okay, we have students. We have a lot of counseling students, which is what I did when I came on board. We have a lot of counseling students, and those counseling students are usually between the ages of anywhere between 20 to 25. So let me see where they are on social media. They are on Instagram. If you look at it, from the ages of 18 to 49, you get a lot of people that are on Instagram. And when I first started, we had a very good, decent number of followers on Instagram, but I really wanted to push it because I knew that a lot of our counseling students were on Instagram, but they really wasn't on Facebook. So I had to shift our focus in order to draw that audience in, which we were able to do. I'm going to give you a couple of more statistics about Instagram. 64% of Instagram users are under the age of 34. Why does that matter? Because if you are an NGO and your main audience is, say, 50 and above, then Instagram may not be the best use of your resources. Again, if you're looking to attract a younger audience, then definitely you want to begin your Instagram journey. The best times to post on Instagram are Wednesday at 11 a.m. and Friday from 10 to 11 a.m. Again, knowing when to post is extremely important to making sure that your message is heard and is able to get through all the other noise that comes in on social media. Now understand that just because I'm giving you these statistics, now these are general statistics. For your organization, you may find that it's different. For example, because we are in the counseling field and we have counselors that's, working, all day, every day, helping clients, our social media engagement peaks at certain times, different times than what some of these statistics say, which is why it's important for you to always check your own statistics and analytics to see where your organization is landing from day to day, because I can tell you more than likely it definitely will change. On the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about Twitter. Now with Twitter, Twitter is a very interesting environment. Twitter is really good when it comes to quick soundbite type information. We use it a lot when it comes to our advocacy, when we're trying to get information out about a bill or legislation. Being able to use Twitter and get those quick sound bites is, we found that to be really, really useful. Or even if we have like an official statement from our organization, we found that Twitter is very good for getting that information out. Another thing Twitter is really, really good for is link clicks. That's the links you put in Twitter, accounts for 92% of all user interaction with tweets. So if you have a link in your tweet, it increases the chance of people interacting with your Twitter feed, which is why a lot of people promote events and things on their Twitter feed, because link clicks are extremely important when using Twitter. On to the next slide. last but not least, there's Facebook. Facebook, there's a almost a more even number of males and females on Facebook. 68% of Americans use Facebook. Facebook is just one of those staples that's gonna be around, hate it or love it. It's there, it's free, it's available for use. And if you use it, and if you're able to use it right, have a good strategy, have a good plan, have great objectives, it can be very, very useful for your organization, because most people access Facebook at least 8 times per day. 8 times per day, just take that in. Most people are checking their Facebook pages every hour while they're working. So your employees are probably checking their Facebook right now. Some of you during this workshop probably have checked your Facebook, and I'm okay with that. But just keep that in mind, understanding where these people are, understanding how people tend to get their information. It is very helpful for you to establish what your organization is gonna do long term. So I've just given you a lot of information. Now I'm going to throw it back over to Rich so we can talk a little bit about thinking about your NGO's message.
Thanks, Katrina. So like I said in the beginning of this workshop, she knows so much stuff. I sit here and listen all day long. But I am going to talk a little more right now about things relative to your NGO's message. And I think that that's a really key thing in terms of how you plan your communication strategy for a project or a goal. First of all, what to post. So, wondering what kind of posts are most useful. And Katrina talked a little bit about the different platforms and formats. Here are 5 kinds of posts I think that every NGO should have on their social media sites. Show people how you help, whatever your mission is. Think about recurring themes about what your organization does and how you want to make sure that people understand those things. And then news updates, not just from you, but put up there what others have said about you, if it's good stuff, of course. Make sure you express gratitude. I think that sometimes people just want to be acknowledged by being thanked for what they said about you or by what they did that supports your mission. And then, of course, use social media to promote your events or your resources, whatever you have available for your supporters. Katrina talked a little bit about how often to post. We took that poll. We saw how many of you are. Some of you I see are posting a lot. Others, maybe not quite as much. Know who your audience is. Sometimes you'll be in an organization who loves posting a lot, but their supporters aren't as into that many posts. So that's part of the strategy behind what you need to be able to do. What social media sites to use. Katrina gave a really good overview of, the big 4. There are many others as well. A lot of organizations just starting out seem to pick up on Facebook and Twitter, although Katrina gave some really compelling information about the other sites as well. Nonprofits use social media platforms every day to connect with constituents, to raise awareness for causes, to seek donations. And when you have engaged followers on one or more of the social networks, I think that organizations can more effectively spread the word about what they're doing, what their campaigns are, what their initiatives are, and you'll hear about some things in the second session about what folks have been doing to sort of tie things together. So one of the things that I would want to make sure of is that you have a communication strategy. And in a moment, Katrina's going to talk to you about an actual case study. But I just wanted to say that set your social media goals so that they support your organization's objectives. It seems pretty simple, but I think there are times when some organizations lose sight of that. So set your social media goals that support your organization's objectives. Another one is identifying your core audience and develop personas to help you better connect. Who will post? What's their point of view? What point of view are you trying to get across to whoever might be reading your stuff? And then determine, of course, like we keep saying, which social media platforms to focus on. Create a content strategy. And then this part is really important, and a lot of groups don't always get to this, but track and measure and share your results. Because the more people that know about the results and you're able to track and measure, it gives you more insight strategically into what you should be doing. I do think that being able to identify and analyze your target audience is really important, and that's why we talk about diving into the data so much. Find out what you can about your audience, you know, and like Katrina said, some people just seem to read emails or look at social media posts at certain times of the day. And if that's part of your constituency, then make sure you're driving those messages at the times, those peak times when you know they're going to be receptive to what you're sending out. The other thing is to set your tracking benchmarks, right? There are some key performance indicators that include the 4 following things. Awareness, in other words, how many impressions or views, or what is your reach in your communications? Growth, those would be how many followers have you increased by? How many people like your stuff more than they did last year at this time? How many subscribers do you have if you are running social media that involves subscribers? The third one is engagement. How many reactions, how many clicks, how many comments, how many shares? This is all a whole new world, especially for older people like me, but it's something we have to be aware of. It's tracking data. And then the last would be conversions. You post something and how many people then register for something, or how many make a financial contribution or write a letter on your behalf. So again, those 4 things: awareness, growth, engagement, and conversions. And like Katrina says, you know your audience. So the last couple of things would be building a content calendar. And we polled you as to how often you post. And I guess there needs to be a strategy based on your members and supporters. And so remember what we said earlier, listen to your supporters, review the data. The other thing is, don't forget to sometimes put in some happy info, right? There was a study at Cornell University in New York. They partnered with Facebook and they conducted a study on about 500,000 users, and they saw that happy content gets shared much faster and wider than content that wasn't as happy. Just something to think about. The other is, obviously, since we're in this age of social media, use visuals. And Katrina talked about some of the sources you can go for that. And the other thing I guess I'd say is that, it's important to keep your posts short. You don't want to write, 10,000 words and post it on Facebook or something like that. So it's all about finding the right spot to be in, to reach the most people possible, to engage them, to build relationships, not just with people who will support you, but with influencers, as they call them, influencers, people who influence what other people will do or read or see, and also with similar organizations, and then to encourage people to share your posts. So that reaches exponentially way more people. In fact, I hope you're using hashtag UN with civil society for things you're posting about this workshop. So I'm going to turn it back to Katrina. She's going to share with you a case study. Katrina?
Thanks, Rich. Yes, I am going to share with you a case study. One of my favorite projects that I've done at ACA, one that I was salivating to get my hands into when I first got the job at ACA, was Counseling Awareness Month. For you who are not familiar with what Counseling Awareness Month is, Counseling Awareness Month was designated by ACA to begin every April. Every April is Counseling Awareness Month. Put that in your calendar. Every April is Counseling Awareness Month. It's designated by ACA, and it's something that we do to make sure that we are highlighting the counseling profession, making sure that, because one of our objectives as an organization is to build and increase awareness around the counseling profession and the impact of professional counselors and the mental health. So if we, I'm sorry, give me 1 second, I'm trying to get these slides together. So if we go down in this slide, what I did was I actually put together the outreach results for our organization so that they can see the results we were having with social media. Before we got started, I wanted to make sure that we had a very catchy and timely message to impart. And for me, that message was encouraging counselors to burn bright, not out. Because a lot of times, our counselors do not get the same love and care, or people don't recognize that they need the same love and care. And sometimes they don't recognize it because they're so busy helping other people that they don't really take the time to help themselves and making sure that they are getting the self-care that they need. So this year, I really wanted to focus on self-care for professional counselors. And I had no idea that COVID-19 would be breathing down our necks, which would make this particular tagline even more profound. Because what we found during COVID is our counselors are working more, they're working differently. They're having to learn about teletherapy and how to do it in a safe and secure way, and how to make their clients feel safe and secure. There's a mental health crisis where more people are accessing mental health services, which means that a lot of our counselors have even more clients. And then not only that, but they're also dealing with home life. They're dealing with, children being at home, running around in the background. They're dealing with, spouses being in the same confined spaces, not being able to go out. So having this tagline during this time could not have been more timely. So one of the things that I wanted to do was make sure that I had various stages in our communications plan that spoke to self-care for counselors, and also provided resources for them to have those times to really care for themselves. So one of the things that I wanted to do with CAM, and this is something that you should definitely think about when it comes to your communication strategy, is making sure that your website lines up with what you want to communicate. Because we can communicate all day on social, but we have to have somewhere to send people to for more information, because the goal is to make sure that traffic is being driven to your site so your products and your services are being seen. Your products and your services are being viewed, and people are looking at what you are doing as an organization as a whole. So I needed to have a really good, beautifully designed landing page for our Counseling Awareness Month campaign. So we put a little bit more money and effort into it, and it paid off, because the amount of traffic that came to our website was 112% more traffic than we had had the previous years. Not only that, but when people came to our landing page, they didn't just come and, and bounce back off, but they came and they stayed. We had an average of time on site of 3 minutes and 19 seconds, which is really impressive, because the average is closer to under 2 minutes. So that means that people were really engaged with the information that we had regarding CAM. Social media was it for us. It was always going to be a big part of CAM, but with the way life happened, March and April, it really became the driving force. It wasn't just an integral component, it was the component. With CAM, I wanted to create a day that everybody could come together and just really go crazy on social media. So we created Teal Day. Teal Day was an opportunity for counselors and counselor advocates to wear the color teal in support of the counseling industry. sure you have seen this with, you know, Wear Pink, Go Pink. You've seen this with Go Red for women, but we wanted something for counselors so they can feel special, so they can feel seen. Until they really allowed for that to happen. Our hashtag Burn Bright, Not Out on its own was such a big engagement tool. A lot of counselors gave us praise for that hashtag because again, they felt as if finally someone is paying attention to what we need. And so it felt really good for those counselors to send those messages of gratitude to let us know how grateful they were for everything that we were doing for CAM. I can go on and on with CAM. We had if you went to our landing page and it is still up, we had a Spotify playlist. We had a meditation video. We had a coloring sheet because you may or may not know, but coloring is a de-stressor. So we had a really nice coloring sheet for them to fill out, and a lot of people colored during the month of April for CAM. We had pledge signs of different people saying how they pledged to burn bright, not out. I can go on and on, but I really want to show you these results. Our CAM, just in the month of April, our CAM campaign, we received over 1.7 million impressions. What does that mean? That means that over 1.7 million people saw CAM. They saw something related to CAM. They used CAM. They used the Burn Bright Not Out hashtag. They posted something related to CAM. They shared something related to CAM. CAM showed up in their feeds. And that was far more than anything that we have seen at ACA on our social media channels. Not only that, but we gained so many followers on all of our social media platforms. Engagement was through the roof. Over the month of CAM, we've seen over 42,000 different pieces of engagement. That means that people were liking, commenting, they were retweeting, they were sharing, they were posting their own posts with the hashtag. And it just became a very good indicator of what we could do as an organization if we had a very strong communication strategy rooted in social media. So very, very proud of what we were able to accomplish with CAM, and it gave us a baseline, more of a baseline for what our organization is capable of and what we should be doing moving forward. So that's CAM. Again, I could go on and on. We had some really great, we even had social media contests, and we had winners. We had partner emails. So we made sure that we covered the communication spectrum fully. So it wasn't just social media, even though that was it, but we also had email campaigns. We also, again, we had the website, or the landing page, I should say. And we also put it in our newsletter. And we just made sure that our partners also had weekly communications regarding CAM and some of the resources that we had and some of the things we were focusing on for the week. So it was truly a comprehensive communication strategy that led to these extremely impressive results. So that's CAM. The next slide, I believe, we are talking about how to ensure that social media is a strategic component and not just an add-on. Rich?
Thank you, Katrina. Very good. Yeah, so in terms of social media being a strategic component, I know some of you have even posted on the chat that maybe your organization doesn't do a lot of social media yet. And when you go back to the beginning of what we said this morning, the fact of the matter is that it is such an all-encompassing thing that it's incumbent, I think, on NGOs to at least look at how they can utilize social media and what that might mean. There was a time, and not that long ago, when a lot of organizations felt it was a nice thing to have. And I guess what I would say is that now it's a critical component and no longer an add-on. It's a communication tool, but more importantly, it is an engagement tool. And again, in the old days, we just wanted to get our message out to people so they would join in and be part of our effort. But now people are more particular with their time. They want to make sure that what they're doing gives them a feeling of engagement and fulfillment. And I think that that's why we utilize social media, because we're able to do those things. Because when you have engaged followers, they will help you then spread your message. And that's the best kind of promotion to have, I think, when somebody else shares with a colleague or another organization what wonderful work that you're doing. So social media allows you to meet key objectives like telling your story, and you get to tell your story every day. Not the same story. You can dress it up a little bit, change it up a little bit. Again, it helps you engage people who are going to support what your mission is, and it increases that awareness. Just think about, because we have people today on this workshop from all over the world. In the old days, before the advent of social media and the internet, a strong base of yours might have been geographically right around where you were located. Now you have worldwide support. And if we're going to accomplish things like the SDGs or whatever else that we put our minds to, we're going to have to engage everyone in these efforts. So that's why I always try to tell people when they're like, oh, you know, we don't have enough money for that or whatever. It's like, you don't have to have a lot of money. That's why we have this workshop. We're talking about what tools you can tap into in order to move your message forward. So I want to make sure you understood that. And if you have any questions, again, just keep posting them. For those questions that we don't answer while we are live, we will try to get back to you. I just wanted you to know that as well. Katrina?
Yeah, to expound on what Rich just said, media really does allow you to truly engage. If we can go back to the previous slide, because I really want them to get this. I understand that a lot of people, especially with NGOs or nonprofits, traditional media has, it was extremely helpful for organizations, but as times has changed, so has the impact of digital media. If you look at the first image, it says time spent per day with digital versus traditional media, just in the United States, from 2011 to 2020, just in minutes, you can see how digital has been on this upward trajectory for years, and it has no intention of slowing down. People spend 451 minutes per day with digital media. Now, digital media, of course, it encompasses a lot. It encompasses online media as well as social media, but you can definitely see that the time people are spending on digital, it definitely lends itself to your organization finding a way to become more digital if you're not already. Traditional media is actually seeing another increase because of COVID and some of the other issues that's plaguing us globally. So traditional media is starting to see another rise itself, but digital media is definitely outpacing it, and trending wise, it will continue to do so. And Rich mentioned this in one of the earlier slides, and I just want to make sure that I reassert what he said. Social media is so much cheaper than traditional media. The amount of money organizations spend on traditional media is far more. It surpasses anything that you would spend on social media. For example, for CAM, I didn't spend one single dime in advertising, not one. I could have, but I didn't, and I didn't have to. Everything that we accomplished for CAM was organic. And I'm glad that I can sit here and say that, because I know we're working with other NGOs who may not have a huge budget. And that just goes to show you that you don't have to have a huge budget in order to accomplish a lot with social media. Social media helps you tell your organization's story every single day, something that you can't really say if you're talking traditional media or emails. But with social media, it's every day, multiple times a day. It gives you an opportunity to tell your organization's story. It helps you engage supporters. It captures and retains their attention, even especially with stakeholders. It also helps you to generate that online community so that it creates its own online viral marketing effect if you're using it wisely. And then lastly, it increases awareness of your organization or brand, which may support fundraising efforts. For me, that is really huge because the very definition of my job is to make sure that I am increasing awareness of our organization. So I have to use social media in order to get the kind of results that I want and the organization needs. So the next slide, I am going to give you a couple of do's and don'ts when it comes to using social media. One is learn as much. I know it's on here, it says everything, but learn as much as you can about social media. I know you have a lot of things happening in your organization. There's a lot of things that you're having to do, probably especially during these times. But I would still encourage you to learn as much as you can about social media and how it can help impact your organization's objectives. Be sure you understand the various platforms' purpose as well as the privacy controls because they change all the time. Again, don't share confidential information on social media, even in closed private settings. Social media is definitely one of those things that can rear up and bite you in the hiney if you are not vigilant about what you're posting and where you're posting to. So even if you think that you're in a closed group or you're in a private setting and people, know that you are the chief executive officer of the American Counseling Association and you're posting something, and that was for illustrative purposes, Rich. You want to make sure that even in those closed settings that you are minding your manners, so to speak. And I say this, I did a presentation with our counselors, professional counselors. I know it's really hard not to get into the hubbub of everything that's happening, and there's so much news and so much craziness that's coming at us on a daily basis. And I know it's difficult not to get into that fray and voice your own opinions. But when it comes to your organization, if you wouldn't say it in real life, please don't post it online. You really, really want to be careful about the statements you make because they have weight and they will carry. So keep in mind that values and beliefs shared online, they can and most likely do make their way to clients, customers, stakeholders, other organizations, and professionals. So let's be mindful of that. On the next slide, there are a few more do's and don'ts I want to share with you. Be accurate and appropriate in the portrayal of your brand organization. People will find you out pretty quickly if any misinformation is given from you about your organization. I think I saw a question in the chat about how do you manage the misinformation. I think the question was about your organization. And I say that with always countering, making sure that you have great posts that speaks to the reputation of your organization. One of my main goals at ACA is to protect our brand integrity, to protect our brand reputation, and to build up on it. So I am always finding ways to make sure that I'm lauding our accomplishments and what we've been able to do, especially during these times. With COVID, really great things. And so making sure that your followers, your members, your customers or clients are always getting information directly from you about what you're doing as an organization. It may not completely drown out the naysayers, but it will go a long way to making sure that you're doing your job to establish your organization as reputable and as needed. Do develop a social media policy. Social media policy should cover any and all risks identified by your organization. For example, our tips for professional counselors are around confidentiality, making sure that they, don't out their client on social media, don't, respond to their clients on social media. So making sure that confidentiality is always first in mind is very important when it comes for us as an organization. And then not engaging with the clients on social, and not diagnosing mental illness in public figures, as hard as that may be sometimes. Not talking about, well, this person has bipolar and that is why they do such and such, or this person is a narcissistic, and that as a professional counselors we caution our counselors not to be that voice on social media, because again, it can get them into a lot of trouble. So whatever that, I don't know what who your organization's main audience is, but that is an example of how you can make sure that you're keeping things tight and right on your social media platforms. And next, we're going to talk a little bit about dealing with a crisis, which everyone know we are still in the middle of. And Rich, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Thanks, Katrina. So I do see that there was a question about if people could ask something like live, not just typing it in the chat. And so there is time toward the end of this half of this session where we will be taking questions, and we'll have more interactive discussion. So if you're here for that, that'd be great. So, right, dealing with a crisis. So what's really important is that you have organizational guidelines and some kind of a response plan. Dealing with a crisis, you don't want to be complacent in any way. And what I mean by that is your organization, all of our organizations, are vulnerable. We could be vulnerable to any number of things, not because we did anything wrong, but because somebody didn't like what we did, they didn't agree with our position, and they do something to make our lives very difficult. So it's important for any group, whether you have a large staff or a small staff, to think through what could happen. What could a crisis be that we will have to address? And not all crises are the same, which means not all responses or plans are the same. So in addition to not being complacent, what that leads to is don't wait. Many organizations only get their crisis plans underway when the disaster strikes. And by then, you can overcome it, but it is much more difficult if you had not planned in advance what could happen and how would we address these things. And it could be anything from your organization is involved with. Am I back?
You're back.
Okay, sorry about that. Sometimes our internet connection is not exactly what we want it to be, but the whole gist of it is that don't wait, because many organizations do get stuck because they did not know something was going to happen. So you want to advocate for a concrete emergency preparedness plan. Again, oftentimes, especially in smaller organizations, we don't think anything bad is going to happen to us. We've got so much going on during the day and during the year that we just don't realize that something bad could happen. A crisis could occur, like I said, among your leadership, with your staff, something in society. So it's really important to advocate among your organization to put together some kind of emergency preparedness plan. And crisis takes all different shapes, like I said. And again, every response has to be geared toward what that crisis might be. information that they need in order to say something, and who will write the information. Those are three very unique skills. Sometimes one person has all three skills, but oftentimes it's better if you have one person who speaks for the organization, one person who knows how to do really good research and can gather data, and then somebody who can write it up so that the person saying it or posting it on social media is able to do that in a coherent way. So again, I think the key thing in dealing with the crisis is who will manage your social media, and to be able to monitor and respond quickly. And the way you do that is by ensuring that you have thought this through way before anything does come up. Katrina?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. Definitely thinking through the different scenarios that could possibly happen. Also having canned messaging ready to answer any questions that people may have. I know when the after George Floyd's death, ACA put out a couple of statements in relation to that. In our social media feed, it got a little bit busy, to say the least. It got a little bit busy with people expressing various opinions about the things that, we were saying in our statement. So we definitely had to pivot really quickly in the way we responded to messages, how we responded to messages. And to be frank, we had to hide certain messages. We had to be extremely vigilant because especially on Facebook, the trolls truly came out. And so we had to be very alert to what people were posting to make sure that, they weren't being offensive or they weren't stirring up mayhem just to stir it up. And that took us really looking at our social media channels from sunup to sundown, managing the different responses that we were getting. So dealing with the crisis, it definitely, you can plan and you can plan and you can plan, but then after you plan, you have to be alert because things can change at a moment's notice, and you just really can never predict how your audience or people that's related to your organization will respond to your messaging as it relates to that crisis. So you have to be on your toes and having a clear plan and emergency preparedness strategy will help you be more efficient in dealing with your crises. For me, staying in front of the story is essential in what I do because I do manage the media relations of ACA as well as the social media, and I, take care of the brand advocacy for ACA as well. But staying in front of the story, although ACA is generous and they do give me paid tools to help me stay in front of the story, I did want to offer you some free tools that you can do at your organization, just so that you are always aware of what's happening and you are not, completely blindsided about what the media is reporting, what people are responding to, what's trending, that sort of thing. One of the main things that I always encourage people to do, especially people in my field of communications, is to set up Google alerts. Setting up Google alerts is free. If you don't have a Gmail account, get one and set up Google alerts. Our Google alerts, of course, they center around our business. So mental health, professional counseling, therapy, those are just a few that I can think off the top of my head. And every morning, Google will gather all the media that's related to whatever in your Google alerts and send it straight to your inbox so you can see what's being talked about in the national conversation. And you can kind of look to see how your organization may fit in or how your organization should be discussing this or be prepared to discuss this. So definitely I recommend getting your Google alerts set up for your organization, not just for a crisis situation, but for everyday situations. Another thing that helps us stay in front of the story, every organization or every industry, I say, probably you have your competitors. You have those people who are kind of in your field and who usually comment on the type of stuff that you comment on. I would say really pay attention to your competitors, and I use that word loosely. Pay attention to the people that's in your field or in your industry to see what they're talking about. I'm not going to say the name of this organization, but there's not a day that goes by that I do not visit this particular organization's page to see how they are framing their messages, whether they are talking about something, how they're talking about it, how much energy and resources they are putting into it. I would definitely recommend that if you have already identified your competitors, especially people that are doing great in their field, keep an eye on them. Check out what they're doing, what they're saying, how they're saying it, when they are saying it. And I promise you, it will really give you a good blueprint to kind of compare to your own messaging and in your own way of handling the different crises or whatever situation that may be out there. I will say too that when you're dealing with a crisis, pivoting quickly is essential. You have to be nimble and you have to be quick. No one was expecting COVID. No one. Thankfully, we had a great COO. We have a really great COO at the American Counseling Association. Oh, and the rest of the C-suite, they're great too. But the COO, she really took it upon herself to have this emergency preparedness task force. And this was in February, I believe, where, there was just inklings of COVID. But again, that comes with keeping your ear to the ground and really having understanding about what's happening and what could happen. And so ACA was really able to pivot quickly and to set up a task force team that was related to COVID and being prepared and having messages put out about COVID, because not only were we dealing with COVID, but we were also dealing with the fact that our annual conference, which is a big deal for ACA, was just what, Rich, 2 months away, a month away? Yeah, so we were dealing with that as well. And we already had, we had quite a few thousand people already registered for the conference. So we had to be super, super, super quick and pivoting and making sure that our members got the information as quickly as we were deciding it. So yeah, pivoting quickly, extremely important. Google Alerts, that is my pro tip for you. Make sure you sign up for Google Alerts. One of the other things that we instituted, I have a mighty team of one, or I should say one other person that works with me. He's my public affairs coordinator. He's amazing. Thank you, Danny, for standing the fight with me. But one of the things that we do is we create for our, we started doing it for our executive team, but now it goes out to our entire staff, is we do these daily media roundups. These daily media roundups, it consists of Danny, my PAC, actually, he's set up with Google Alerts, and him looking at social media and the trending topics and the different things that's happening and what people are talking about. We also have reporters that we follow, so we're always, listening and monitoring to understand what's being said out there, what's gonna be said out there. So every morning he compiles some of the most gripping stories that comes through on his Google Alerts, so that our staff, more so our ET team, executive team, will know what people are talking about. So we can start looking at how does ACA fit into this national conversation? What do we need to be prepared for as an organization? And so every morning at 10:30 a.m., this email of the top of 3 stories, varying from, mental health and coronavirus. Everything is related to mental health for our organization. It may be different for yours, but mental health, virus, mental health and racism, mental health and racial disparities in the health system. Again, so that our company, our organization can know what's being said out there and finding ways and finding gaps where ACA can be a resource or fill in where, you know, information may not be there, or more information may be needed. So that is my quick little addition to the whole dealing with the crisis and staying in front of the story topic. I think next we're going to talk a little bit about training the staff and or volunteer leaders. Of course, first you need that strategy. I don't do anything without a strategy. I usually write a strategy, and then I also make sure that I call it a discovery meeting, especially when it comes to specific projects or campaigns. But for social media itself, I would definitely say have a strategy, do your research, check out what your competitors are doing, even on social media, peek over at your neighbor's paper and see exactly how they are structuring things. There's nothing wrong with that. Making sure that you have a strong policy and guidelines, because one of the things, because ACA has volunteer leaders too. And so one of the things you have to understand as an organization, whether you're new or whether you're, you know, new to social media or you've been doing social media all the time, everyone is not going to be a social media guru. You know, some people are still a little bit afraid of social media. They don't want to say the wrong thing, or they don't want to put themselves out there. There are still people that are cautious about social media. So you want to do as much as you can to make sure that they are properly trained and given the right set of processes so that they can be confident and comfortable in helping you advance your social media goal. As far as the social media response guide, this becomes extremely important, not just when dealing with a crisis, but pretty much everything. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that I did when I came onto ACA is to make sure we were responding more to our followers. Even if they gave us, great job, ACA, even if it was thank you, because we weren't doing that as much as we should have been doing. So just making sure that there is a response guide so that people know that you're not just a robot, you know, doing your little, you know, social media posts as an organization, but that you care and you're listening to them and you're responding to them in a timely manner. You know, some questions may be as inane as, you know, how do I become a member of ACA? You know, why isn't ACA talking about, you know, climate change? Like, those are questions that although you may not want to answer them, you need to be prepared to answer them, and you need to have a response guide prepared for that, especially during these times when it comes to very hot topics such as racism. You will want a response guide. You do not want to be caught off guard. Some response guides, most of the questions I can answer myself because I'm pretty much the manager of social media, but there are some questions that are beyond me, and I need either the executive team with Rich or the governing council to lend their voices to. And so that's something else you need to have in your response guide. What type of questions need to be ran up the chain and what that process looks like. So everybody is aware, everybody is understand what needs to happen at any given time. And then just when it comes to training staff, it's really the social media management. This is the bulk of the work. I never do anything without a calendar. And even though I always get people interfering with my calendar, I still have my calendar. I still have set posts from day to day, from hour to hour for each of our channels, because it allows me to look and see what are we posting, what type of information are people getting from us, and are they getting enough diverse information so that it looks as if we're paying attention and we're giving them things that relate to what they need and not just what we want to give them. One thing with social media, I don't think I've said this yet, but with social media, you only really want to promote yourself 20% of the time on social. Everything else should be serving your followers, serving your members, or serving the people that are tied to your organization. So self-promotion, social media isn't for your self-promotion. You can use it as such, and you will actually see more organic engagement if you don't promote yourself. So be very mindful when you're working your calendar out, what times you're promoting, how much you're promoting, versus how much really good, essential information you're giving to your followers. So having that social media calendar is, I wouldn't start without it. I wouldn't start without it. I really wouldn't. And then again, having that calendar, it will actually help you with your publishing plan. Again, because I'm sure at your organization, it might happen at your organization because it happened at mine as well. No matter how much I have my social media calendar, there are always going to be requests from the top where, you know, we need to put this out on social. We need to put this out on social. So having a calendar will allow you enough flexibility to know that when those requests comes in, you know where to slot them, and it doesn't feel like you're being too bombarded. So making sure that you have in that calendar, you have that publishing plan is very important. For me and Danny, who is my public affairs coordinator, we do have an approval process. Danny, he gets out there and he gathers the information, and I actually have to approve it to make sure that things line up, things look good, that it's a good representation of our brand, of our organization, so that we don't have any problems. We don't want to have any problems. I wanted to give you an example. Back in April, we had a really good post. I thought it was a really, really good post. And it also would give you a glimpse into how different people on different channels see things. So Danny had this really good post about tips for a mindful counselor. And I remember telling him how much I love the image that he chose. It was an image of a male counselor sitting down and a female counselor sitting down. The male counselor, he had, you know, the button-up shirt and some slacks. The female counselor, she had a really pretty blue dress. Her legs were crossed, and the dress actually covered right below her knees. I thought nothing of the picture. I didn't think it was indecent. I thought it was great. Then we posted it, and the differing comments on Facebook and Instagram was very enlightening. Remember, Facebook, their audience tends to be a little bit older, and Instagram tends to be a little bit younger. So while Facebook comments, and it was only a few, not even a few, a couple, and then people start responding to those comments. The Facebook comments were, oh my God, she does not look like a counselor. No counselor should ever wear something that's short, and blah, 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 blah. And it really took me off guard because I didn't see anything wrong with my eyes regarding what she had on. And for me, it was, you know, it was for illustrative purposes. I wasn't saying that she was a counselor, but that's how some of the people on Facebook took it. Instagram, they really focused on the message. They thought it was an amazing post. And even on Facebook and Instagram, the post did really, really well. It's still one of our best posts today. But it's just really interesting to see that, yeah, even in the approval process, although Katrina didn't see an issue with it, and overall, I still don't think it's an issue, but just know that there may be issues that pop up from time to time, and you just have to be prepared to weigh the influence of those comments. It's entirely up to you as the expert for your organization on how you want to deal with those type of things. And then the last little bit is analytics. I look at analytics every day because I am constantly tracking and measuring the success of every last post that we do, because I want to make sure that our followers, our members, they're getting the information that they need. It's not about me. It's not about ACA wanting to be the biggest, the best, the bestest, the baddest. It's about our members actually feeling valued and actually feeling informed by ACA. So I am constantly tracking the analytics and training Danny on how to look at our analytics to see what posts we should be doing more of and what posts we probably don't want to do as much about. So Rich, I don't know if you have anything that you want to add there as far as training staff and volunteer leaders, because you work with the volunteer leaders a little bit more than I do.
Right. I think it's really key that although people might do a lot of social media on their own in their personal lives, there is a strategy behind what our organizations need to do. So rather than just give the keys to the car to volunteers or leaders who might not have had that training, it's really important, even if you're just sitting down with that leader, to talk to them through what it is we're trying to achieve. Again, there's strategy behind everything, and even though we might not have huge budgets, we still have a strategy for our organizations. I do know that we're to move into the interactive discussion. I know some people have some questions, so I think Katrina can just wrap up this part pretty quickly here. Did you want to say anything about creating and executing on the plan, and then we'll move right into that?
Sure, absolutely. Really quickly, to consider, and I have reconsider, because social media is not a one and done. You're going to want to look at your strategy, and you're going to want to look at the social media landscape constantly, because it's constantly changing. So when you get started, you do want to ask yourself these questions. Who will be reading and commenting on your social media site? Who are you trying to engage? That's your audience. Those are the people that you want to follow you, not just on social media, but also follow your organization as you increase awareness and build your brand reputation. How will you identify them and attract them to your networks? What social media networks will you be using? That's a very big one. Again, if you're just starting out, you don't have to do all of them. Maybe you start with one, maybe you start with two, but also researching and seeing the key statistical information of each of those platforms to better understand where your organization may fit in their those platforms in their social media journey is very important. Who will establish the networks? Of course, for ACA, it's with the PA, it's with the public affairs strategist. It may be with someone different or someone with a different title in your organization, who will establish the networks, who will be administrators, who will maintain the page. That's a big one, because that is a daily responsibility. It's not something that you want to just, set up and leave and go scurry off and do something else. If you're going to commit to social media, you're going to want to stay committed. How often will it be updated? Will you post once a day? Will you post 3 to 5 times per week? That's conversations that you need to have with yourself or whoever else is helping you with social media. I think that was the last little bit. I got through it really quickly so that we can get to questions if we need to now. Rich.
Great. So we'll go ahead and open up the mics and everything, so that if you do have a question, if you could perhaps, raise your hand, we'll try to see you. It's sort of hard to see hundreds and hundreds of people, or you can just try speaking and we'll try to answer. So what do we have? Anybody have a question?
I do see, I'm looking at the Q&A, I do see Susmita. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. Susmita, how to reduce the fake news circulation? What is verification process? Nowadays, people like short messages, no time to verify or ask critical questions to the post. What will be your advice to reduce these? Fake news circulation is just one of those things that, unfortunately, until the powers that be, such as the people that own these platforms, until certain policies are changed with the way they, approach the information on their channels, as consumers, we have to do as much as we can. We're not going to be able to do a lot to reduce the fake news circulation. The best approach to that is to always make sure that your message is accurate. Make sure that your message is reputable, because when it comes to fake news, the only thing that right now that can counter it is good news, is real news. So making sure, that's why it's so important for you not to abandon your social media channels, but that you're constantly putting information on your channels that can counter the noise of fake news and other things that's happening on social media as much as possible. The verification process, there really isn't a verification process unless you do the extra work to research it, because you're not gonna, like, Facebook doesn't have a tool that says this is fake news. I do know that Twitter, when it comes to certain public figures, if they are blasting out things that are factually, that are, you know, incorrect factually, they have, you know, started to put a little flag up to let you know what is fake news. But when it comes to other, you know, random Joes and Joannes who circulating fake news, right now there's no way to counteract that unless you go beyond just looking at that post and doing the extra work to verify it yourself.
Yeah, and you know, in terms of fake news or disinformation, there's a couple of things. First of all, that is something, and we talked about it in the very beginning of the session, in terms of, while social media can do so much good, there is the potential for some bad things to happen. And when you go to places like factcheck.org, or you look at UNESCO's hashtag Fight Fake News site, they have a handbook they have on journalism and fake news and disinformation. The fact of the matter is that people get their news from two sources, mainly, right? They get it from news organizations, and they get it from social media. So that means they're putting a lot of stock in that. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us who run NGOs, who are part of NGOs, that we make sure that what we put out there is correct and factual, but that when we start to see somebody trying to put out something that is not true, that we're able to respond. And that's why we talked earlier about crisis response and making sure that you have a plan in place for, so if somebody starts posting something like that, you know what to do. The instantaneous things are, if somebody's posting something really mean on your website or on your Facebook page, you know, you could take it down, but more importantly, you need to figure out what's going on there and how to address it, because it'll raise a question in people's minds.
Any more questions out there? We have about 5 minutes.
Hello there. I have a question regarding our.
Sorry, Anna.
Sorry, my internet connection is pretty bad, looks like.
That's okay. Anwar, you want to try that again? What was your question?
My question is, our organization had a Facebook page, and we decided to step back from Facebook page, even though we have we had a large crowd of followers. So one of the reasons that we decided to step back, because we start seeing that some of the people were like using our post for using our post just to spread their own agenda, or like, you know, posting on our page like, you know, marketing purpose. So we step back because we want to be more, like, you know, authentic. But my question is, I want to go back to that platform again. But should we restart the whole process from ground zero, or just like go back to what we already have and clear it up? If we do, how do I do that, and how do I kind of like rebrand and like, you know, make it more clean and clear? Is it am I making sense?
Katrina?
Yeah, I'll attempt to answer that. It sounds like your page was, I'm trying to understand whether or not your page was hijacked, or was your messaging being misconstrued? Because if it's a matter of your messaging being misconstrued, I'm not sure what your circumstances are, or if your organization has a way of, you know how Facebook, or I should say Twitter, has the blue check for, you know, verified accounts. There may be a way for on your Facebook channel to, when you do post, there's almost like a verifier that you can use for your messages, so that people understand that until they see that, you know, whether it's a blue check or whether it's some other thing that you want to use to kind of identify your content as the real content, that was what I would suggest for you. Now, if it's a matter of somebody completely hijacking your Facebook, you probably will need to start over. If you haven't already tried to contact Facebook, the company Facebook, to see what they can do about getting you back control of your page. I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly, or even if I answered it correctly, but hopefully something I said in there helped. Rich, you want to add anything?
No, I agree with what you said. I think that Holly, who is our chair and coordinator, wanted to also share something. Holly?
Thanks, Rich. Yes, I wanted to mention that the Department of Global Communications has some excellent resources in this area, as does the UN. And Jeff mentioned earlier the pause before sharing, and using the site shareverified.com, which will help to assess whether information is valid or not. Patrick has also posted the UNESCO material, and I'd like to remind everyone that the focus of our next program in the series, which will be in the middle of August, is around how to share accurate, valid, and current contemporary information. So the focus of that whole workshop will be exactly in this area: how to assess information and then go ahead and share vital information in a timely manner to avoid some of the misinformation and disinformation. So please stay tuned for our next session that'll focus on this important area.
Great, thanks. So we actually are coming up on the time that we said we would break for about 15 minutes. And so if you need to go check an email or post something on social media or grab a cup of coffee, whatever it might be, we're going to take about 15 minutes. We'll stay open like this. You don't have to log back in. And then when we come back, Holly will be leading us in the discussion session with some folks who will have some actual issues that they have dealt with. And Katrina and I will be around to react to some of those in terms of communications policy and social media and things like that. Holly, did you want to say anything else before we take our little break? Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that the hashtag, and we'd like you to please use it, is hashtag UN with civil society. We would like to really, the comments that you're making are wonderful and very enthusiastic, and we'd like to share that back to Happy News, but share that with the whole global community. And when we begin again at 11 o'clock, we're going to focus in on some of the issues that several of you have raised in terms of how to communicate regarding some of these highly sensitive and tough issues that have been kept under the carpet for a long time. So we're going to be able to apply some of the information that Rich and Katrina have shared, and also focus on how NGOs can begin these challenging conversations, and also we're going to hear from an NGO that's challenged by non-digital resources. So focusing a little bit on communication without the advantage of the digital world and how some of that can be optimized. So we encourage you to take care of yourself in the next 15 minutes and come back as promptly as possible for 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Hello, Doreen. You're on mute.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
I don't think they're on yet.
Oh, okay. They're
should be
probably
any moment,
taking a
yeah.
hygiene break. I'm going to put my.
You're muted again, Doreen. Yep. Hi, Hallie.
Holly, I have 11:02, and if you'd like to start the session, I think your folks are here.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're very pleased to begin the second half of our session. I just wanted to remind you about the hashtag, which is hashtag UN with civil society. We have almost 600 participants from way over 25 countries on almost every continent. So we're really delighted, especially for the people who are staying up late at night across many time zones to be with us. This second half, I also want to mention that we're recording this session, and several people have inquired about obtaining a copy of the recording and the slides. And the Department of Global Communications will be able to distribute the recording. Information will be on the Executive Committee website and also the DGC website. And we'd like to make that available to everyone as soon as possible. This session is quite different, but building on our prior really outstanding session. We're calling this Transforming NGO Communication from Conversation to Advocacy, Action, and Social Policy, because our focus in civil society is really using the resources available to us throughout the United Nations system, and especially the Department of Global Communications, in order to advocate and become involved in civil society action, hopefully resulting in changes in social policy. In this session, we're going to address the issue of communication regarding the complex global contemporary societal issues that we've all been struggling with throughout the world, and the intersectionality resulting in disparities and discrimination. We're going to highlight strategies for NGOs and civil society to identify obstacles within their own organizations, social and professional networks, in actualizing the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I'd like to remind you again, we're really celebrating throughout the world as an exemplar of a transformational and prescriptive document that really addresses in a very clear way how we can actualize peace and security for all peoples of the world. I encourage you again to please reread not only the UN Charter, which always is so moving, but also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What we're going to be doing in this part of the session is really focusing in on individual NGOs and civil society leaders and ways in which they've tackled some of these very complicated communication issues. And our impetus in doing that comes, at least on my part, from two areas. One is that amidst this horrible pandemic, we also experienced the dreadful reality brought to public awareness in a way that hasn't been done before about inequities and racism, discrimination of all forms throughout the world. And we felt as though it was really important to address some of those basic communication issues in order to make social change. Also, clinically, my involvement is as a trauma, bereavement, and crisis specialist. And I consult throughout the world, as well as in the US, around catastrophes of all kinds. And I recently had a conversation with a colleague about the Avianca airline crash many years ago. And the airline industry has identified that in most of the recent devastating airline crashes, there has not been a case of mechanical failure or even human error. And the one area that's been implicated in this tremendous loss of life is communication. So the airline industry has really led in many ways improving communication between individuals in the cockpit, individuals in other areas of the airline industry in order to enhance clear, direct communication and begin to address some of the cultural obstacles that are in the way of clear communication. So we're going to start our conversation. We have three teams, and we're going to start with using racism, African Americans and persons of color in North America and Europe as an example of discrimination that we're all eager to do something about, but some of us don't know how to even begin to talk about it. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Rose Cardarelli, who is the CEO of several NGOs, and she also has been a director on the Global NGO Executive Committee, and she has a very long history and set of experience dealing with many of these topics in a professional capacity. And her partner in this discussion is Colonel Doreen Hurt, who I hope you read her bio. She is a very accomplished and highly decorated colonel, retired now from the US Army. And she's dealt with this complex situation personally and professionally. And we'd like to focus on this, how to begin these complex, complicated conversations. The platform is yours, Dr. Cardarelli and Colonel Hurt.
Thank you, Holly, for such a very eloquent introduction. And Doreen and I are very grateful to be here today to talk about a very sensitive and difficult topic, but it's important and it's relevant. And both Doreen and I worked in very large, diverse organizations. And now with my affiliation with the United Nations and with NGOs, I felt that this topic was important enough to discuss in our communications workshops. So Holly, thank you very much for including us. During my career in the military, I was trained as a race relations officer, and that goes back decades. And I really felt I was quite accomplished and quite prepared to discuss race issues. And I felt we were doing a pretty good job for decades. You know, after all, soldiers that train for combat usually live by a code. And I thought we were all following that code. But as I became senior and more wiser, I discovered two things. The first was there was a dormant, latent, subversive, implicit racial discrimination that still existed. And that surprised me. And I felt very naive and ignorant. The second one was I was colorblind. And I was kind of proud of that fact because I thought I saw all people in the military as equal. And I thought that I was really setting the example as a leader. So now we fast forward to today, and we all know about the many incidences that have occurred over and over and over. And I had to ask myself, how did this happen? And I pondered and questioned and studied and analyzed it a lot, but I couldn't come up with the answers. And this was a frequent topic at my dinner table. And then I discovered it would quickly be forgotten because we got busy with other things. Then late one night after George Floyd was killed, I received a love letter for my white friends. Well, you have to admit that threw me off because it was a letter that I received late at night. And I said, who would send me such a letter? That courageous communications came from my friend Doreen. Now, she and I served together in the Medical Service Corps. We were commanders together in the military at the highest levels. And I actually met Doreen through my mother, they were friends first. My mother had experienced discrimination as an immigrant when she came to the United States by both, her family here as well as people that she interacted with. And she witnessed this discrimination that Doreen was experiencing on a military installation, and that's what brought these two together. Well, that letter that Doreen wrote to me brought us together today because I realized that those who had received it, needed to know about this, and that while Doreen and I were in the same Army, received the same training, commanded at the same levels, which meant that we were at the top 1% of the Army, we had very different experiences. And these are experiences that I've only just now become aware of. I didn't know any better, and I thought I was a well-read, educated individual. So I'm going to stop here because we all need to hear how white privilege can blind us into thinking that we're all equal. And I'll turn this over to Doreen to tell her story. Doreen?
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor for me to speak with you. I'd like to thank Dr. Holly Shaw, Richard Yep, the Department of Global Communication, and my long-term friend, Rose Cardarelli, for the invitation. Before I make my remarks, I believe it's important to inform you of a few things and offer some definitions of terms that I'll be using. First, I have only one disclaimer, and that is the statements and views that I offer for your consideration are solely my own and don't imply endorsement of any entity or anyone else. They are a reflection of how I process my personal life experiences and those of my family, friends, and colleagues. Simply stated, although I'm asked a lot, what do all Black people think? I do not represent the thinking of all African Americans. So I just wanted to put that out there. Secondly, I'd like to offer my definitions of key terms that I'll be using. Others may have different views, and that's okay, but it's important for you to understand the basic context from which I am speaking from my perspective. Communication often fails when people are dealing with issues or discussing matters based on very different and fundamental understandings of what's being discussed. So it's really important to understand the definitions. The first definition is racism. In my view, racism is a prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership of a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is a minority or marginalized. Racial discrimination is the belief that different races possess distinct characteristics, abilities, or equalities, especially so as to distinguish them as inferior or superior to one another. Discrimination is the unjust or prejudicial treatment of different categories of people or things, especially on the grounds of race, age, and sex. Institutional or structural racism which is a lot of the discussion that's happening today to try to unearth and dismantle that, is a form of racism that is embedded as normal practice within society or an organization. It can lead to such issues as discrimination in criminal justice, which we see a lot in the United States, employment, housing, healthcare, political power, education, just to name some areas. And structural discrimination is a form of institutional discrimination against individuals of a given protected characteristic such as race or gender, which has the effect of restricting their opportunities. Redlining, for those of you who've never heard about redlining, is a systematic denial of various services by federal agencies, local government, as well as the private sector, either directly or through the selective raising of prices. Neighborhoods with high proportions of minority residents are more likely to be redlined than other neighborhoods with similar household incomes, housing, age, and type, and other determinants of risk, but different racial compositions. What you need to understand before I say anything further is, no matter how challenging the issues are that we're experiencing in the United States right now, if not for the centuries of sacrifice and brutality that my ancestors as African-American slaves beginning in the United States in 1619, the brutality that they suffered, it's central to how and why the United States developed and prospered. If you remove African Americans from the equation, thinking about back 400 years, and you realize that there is no America as you see it today without free labor for hundreds of years. My ancestors paid the price and earned the right for me and all African Americans to have the opportunity to live our fullest potential within a society that is safe, just, and free from racial, ethnic, or discrimination of any kind. I firmly believe that we have earned this right, having toiled, fought, and died for this nation. So I'm fundamentally through and through American. I love America, but that does not diminish the fact, as Ro alluded to, that we have many issues still to work through. Given the work that many of you in the UN have done across the globe, it's my sincere hope that you will receive some insights that'll resonate with you and translate into actions that you can take to help improve the welfare of marginalized people in various nations around the world. I know that you're working very hard at that now, but I just wanted to give you some other things to think about that might be useful in your work. Let me start with a question. Is it realistic to truly believe that the United States or any nation with hundreds of years of oppression of marginalized people who have little or no power would not have vestiges of structurally biased racist systems that discriminate in 2020? Unfortunately, you well know that the globe is full of leaders that marginalize and brutalize their citizens. I sincerely commend you for the work that you do to mitigate and address this reality, often putting yourselves in harm's way. I'm here this morning to share my experiences because I'm hoping that you'll glean something from my experience that will touch and motivate you even more to act in a way that improves the life of marginalized people in America and abroad. I wrote part 1 of my June 10th love letter and call to action and change to my white friends because I'm fortunate enough to think that my closest white friends would begin to understand that America's problems are far beyond a few bad apples acting out. When incidences happen, brutality happens, injustices happen, people are quick to say, well, those are just a few bad apples. That's not the predominant nature of our country and thinking of our country. In many ways, I agree. In many ways, I strongly disagree. I've just seen too much throughout my now 65 years of life to know that we've got major issues that we need to deal with. Everyone has the right to not live in fear and essentially be terrorized by an implicitly biased system. I also chose to reach out to my friends because I believe that they were open to becoming more self-aware and unearthing their own unconscious biases than address them. Unfortunately, it took watching George Floyd murdered in living color in broad daylight to shake many Americans into finally believing what African Americans have been talking about for centuries, that there are deep structural systemic problems beyond police brutality. Just think of the mindset, if you will, of that police officer killing that Black man in that way, knowing that he was being videotaped. He put his hands in his pocket. He dehumanized George Floyd in that moment. That day, which made it possible for the officer to think that it was okay to kill him in broad daylight. There's a different sense about what's different now than in previous times of killings. Because there's a different sense now about the reactions to Floyd's death than anyone previously in recent memory. There are many examples of other people, that African Americans that were killed at the hands of police, sitting in a car, not doing anything overt, and killed because of what they look like in many instances. But now what's different is there seems to be an increased sense of urgency to change. That is heartening to me because living in a racist society is exhausting. I want everyone to hear me say that. Living in a racist society is exhausting.
Doreen, we're going to have to wrap it up because we have other speakers after us. So if you could summarize, that would be wonderful.
Okay, I just wanted to give you a few examples, and that is in my growing up, some of my love letter, which I'll be happy to share with Ro, and she can give it out, and I'll also share my resources. My experiences started with my father being in the Air Force, and he originally went into the Air Force. I'll try to speak quickly about this, but it's important because it was so racist in Philadelphia and he couldn't find work. He went in the Air Force, he got his skill, he got out of the Air Force, but when he did get out of the Air Force, he was told back in Philadelphia, we're not gonna hire you. He went back in the Air Force. So in a strange way, because of how racist our society was, that is what instilled in me the motivation to serve our nation. Because even though it was bad, it wasn't as bad as it was in Philadelphia. The other example I want to give you is as we traveled, we always had to ensure that we had a clear map and route of what we were going to do, because we couldn't stay anywhere that we wanted to stay. Our parents prepared us to be treated brutally and how to respond if things happen that we weren't expecting. And I'll give you two more examples, and then I'll give you the 10 points that I want to have you take away. One example is there was a white man that worked for me in Colorado Springs when I was a young officer. He was so ingrained with how he felt that he told me to my face that he had a problem working for me because I was African American. He was told, as he was raised, that no matter how poor, ignorant he was, that he would be better. He's always better than me because I was Black, period. It didn't matter my education. It didn't matter my skills. That resonated with me. And I started working with people even before that, but definitely in Colorado, to help them understand what my experience was and the kinds of things that they could do to improve the situation. I will fast forward to my 10 points because I think those are the most important things, and Holly alluded to. The goal of this meeting is to give people tools that they can use to take away that can help improve the future. The first thing that I would say is, excuse me for a second. The first thing that I would suggest is that we have to admit that there's a problem. You can't solve what you don't admit and don't understand in detail. So we need to admit that the kinds of issues that many minorities have been talking about for centuries actually exist. Believe what we're saying. The second thing I would say is to listen. Not only listen, but actually hear and understand what affected people are saying about the negative impact of laws, policies, and hold people accountable for their actions, and hold yourself accountable for your actions and your inactions. Because if you're not acting, then in a way you're complicit with the status quo. The third thing is to educate yourselves, and especially your family. These behaviors are learned. Babies don't come out of the womb being racist and prejudiced. They're learning behaviors. We can do something about that. You can become an anti-racist. And that's my fourth point. It's not enough to just say you're not racist. You need to be an anti-racist. Studies have shown that children as young as 3 already know or beginning to understand the difference in what being advantaged by being white than being another race it gives them. They understand it that early, so we've got to work on that. The fifth item is hold our police accountable, insist on criminal justice and legislative reforms, decriminalize how minorities are treated in the criminal justice system. The sixth thing is exercise your right to vote in all elections. Help others to do the same. If you need to help register them, if they need help getting to the polls, do that. This is an all hands on deck kind of situation that we need to deal with. The seventh thing is organize and peacefully protest. Insist on restoring moral leadership in our government. The eighth thing is complete the census. How communities are funded, as many of you know, is a critical factor based on the census. The ninth thing is call out people, no matter who they are, when you see blatant racism or others being marginalized. And finally, do what you can do to change things. Do not wait for the things to get into a perfect kind of situation before you feel compelled to act. There are people that are dying in our society or not living their best life because of how we are structurally and institutionalized and operate. And remember, I want you to remember that white silence can be construed as being complicit with the status quo. Let's make this moment a catalyst for long overdue reforms. And with that, I will end, and hopefully there'll be questions at the end. I'll be very happy to take, and I will be happy to share all of my resources, publications and videos that might help you have the courageous conversations needed to change things. Thank you.
Doreen, thank you. I'll turn this back over to Holly, please.
Thank you very much. We're really interested in how this courageous conversation began, and maybe we'll have time at the end to really hear more about what your love letter resulted in from your white friends. I'd like to now introduce an advocate, someone who has not waited for the world to improve, but has really been an activist in making the world a better place. Mazen Mukhtar is a Sudanese American who by the age of 16 had a paid position with the University of Maryland Space Systems Laboratory, one of the premier aerospace engineering laboratories in the United States, as well as a job offer from Boeing. He dropped out of school when he was in his 4th year at 18 to start working to reform the educational systems in California and New York. He co-founded the Akshar Foundation in India in 2013, where he helped to develop the Akshar education model, which converts schools into centers for sustainable development and community transformation. I really encourage you all to go to the Akshar Foundation's website, which is aksharfoundation.org, because this program is phenomenal. We're not going to be able to discuss the educational aspects, but what we are going to discuss and have Mazen talk to us about is another form of discrimination that occurs not only in India, but the US and other parts of the world. And that's colorism and caste, dark versus light skin tone. And Mazen is going to talk with us about conversations to transform attitudes, behavior, and social norms among children, adults, and families. He's going to address institutional and societal marginalization based on caste and skin color, and how he's operated with his partner in a rural, an urban, remote area in India without all of the advantages that we discussed earlier in terms of social media. So Mazen, thank you very much for joining us from Assam, India. You might want to tell us a little bit about Akshar and the implications in communication since the pandemic started, and then how you deal directly communicating with kids and families around systemic discrimination and dysfunctional social norms.
Sure. Thank you so much, Holly. Thanks to all the organizers for helping me, for inviting me to participate. So as Holly said, at Akshar Foundation, we've developed a new education model that turns schools into centers for sustainable development. In short, we employ child laborers as teachers and as development workers. Now, the school is designed to be a microcosm of society at large. So it includes a legal system, a system of wages, a banking system for students, and financial penalties for kids who violate the code of conduct. I'll give some background on the model, since the financial system and the legal system we have in the school help us to very effectively address issues of discrimination among the students. Next slide, please. Brandy? Oh, it's there, okay. In the Akshar education model, children are employed and they earn wages in school. We started paying children to get dropouts and child laborers back into school and keep them from dropping out again. They earn wages mostly by teaching younger students, but also by working after school in the office, recycling center, animal shelter, tree planting, and landscaping, and even making furniture for the school in the carpentry workshop. We're building a school to career pipeline with a promise to parents and students that teens will be placed into a high-skilled career through college for some, or apprenticeships and training in a craft for most. The different jobs they can do on campus help them to find a high-skilled profession that suits them. Here's a quick 2-minute video that will give you a good idea of our program. If you please, Brandy.
We decided to collect plastics from our students because that was the immediate problem. We heard reports from the students that they would burn plastic almost every day. And in the winter months, all the students gathered around it for warmth. So then we made it compulsory.
We have made this structure by using acrylics.
The students are also getting more conscious now. They are aware that plastic is bad for health, burning plastic is bad, and they are talking to their parents about the ill effects, and like that actually they're starting to understand.
What is it?
hope that they have enough skills, so that they can stand up on their own feet. So we are trying to develop a model where we go from schooling to employment.
So now during the COVID lockdown, classes are happening over smartphones on WhatsApp, and the school itself has become a food distribution center for families hit by the COVID lockdown. Senior students act as social workers, identifying and taking photos of houses in their neighborhoods with food shortage and sending to teachers who deliver the rations. So this one school has delivered 2-week ration kits for about 15,000 people in the city where the school is. And now we're working on replicating this model in government schools throughout India. But when we started in 2016, students and parents were full of really harmful behaviors and dangerous ideologies. And they acted out these harmful ideas, whether about the role of women or students with disabilities, but especially about skin color and caste. I'm a Sudanese American working in India, and I've witnessed these same sorts of hierarchies replicated all over the world. In the US, I lived in South Africa, and in my home country of Sudan. Colorism is everywhere, not just from Europeans. In Sudan, my home country, the name of the country means the land of the blacks. So in Sudan, lighter skinned Africans like my family from the north discriminate terribly against darker skinned Sudanese in the south and the west. My family, despite being black, are almost as bigoted as any Americans of European descent you can find. And I saw some of the same thing in African American communities, but to a much lesser extent. So regardless of the presence of Europeans, there's always a preference given to those with lighter skin tones. I believe it's more of a class-based issue, since wealthy elites everywhere live sheltered lives, mostly indoors, while the lower tiers of society have to spend more and more time outdoors, working and traveling in the sun. In India, colorism is all pervasive. You can see it in the ubiquitous skin lightening products on TV all day. You can see it in the newspaper classifieds, where most listings will specify how fair-skinned a woman is as her most important feature. And you can see it in children's textbooks like this one on this slide. That the idea that light skin is equated with beauty and high status. Now, colorism overlaps with casteism in India to form a really toxic mess. We've had a few students from Dalit communities, or outcast as they're called, and they're literally out of caste, like they're not considered part of the caste system. And the kids from those households are routinely shunned as a matter of fact. Like it's just an everyday fact of life, even by teachers. And other kids are instructed by their families not to even touch them. So they're literally untouchables. So all these students came to us already filled with these harmful ideas. Even among our students, all of our students are from below the poverty line, but there's still these same hierarchies among those families, separating them into discrete groups. So one example we had earlier on was one parent who was repeatedly harassing other parents with darker skin and from a lower caste. This happened outside of school as they were neighbors, but she told these parents to stop sending their kids to the same school that her kids were going, where her lighter skinned children were going. Now, the real problem was those darker skinned parents who were the victims of this abuse, they complied with her wishes. They agreed with her. They were ready to stop sending their kids to our school. So even they were deeply convinced of their low status and were terrified to try and upset the status quo. And that's how bigotry becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Next slide, please. So my wife, Parmita, who is the principal of the school, we kind of developed a bit of a system for addressing problems like these that come up from time to time. She went to the offender's home and very loudly and publicly shamed her for her behavior in front of all the neighbors. The bullying stopped, and there was no more bullying from parents based on discrimination. Oh, my internet connection is unstable.
Yeah, Mazen, you were out for a minute. Can you just repeat that?
From the slide change?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we had this mother who was bullying all the others, bullying her neighbors and encouraging the kids to stay home. My wife, who's the principal of the school, she went to the home of the offenders and very loudly and publicly shamed them in front of their neighbors. And she elevated the victims by telling the offending mother how important their children are. And if she doesn't like it, she can withdraw her children from the school. Then she had to scold the victimized parents for acquiescing to her crazy demands and for having such a low opinion of themselves. After that, the bullying stopped and we all could put the matter behind us, and there was no more bullying from parents. Because it was so public, all the parents could see the shaming process. So we still, after that, had a few cases of discrimination among students in the early days, but no incidents in the last year or two. And this tells us that the system is rather effective. So the 4 steps are essentially public shaming, holding a mock trial for open discussion, empowerment of the victim, and forgiveness of the perpetrator after they're punished. So another case to illustrate, we have a daily system of tutoring in the school called Matchup, where an older student is paired to teach a younger one, and they get paid for this. So in one pairing, the young student refused to learn from his mentor. And his explanation was, she's too black to teach me. I can't learn from someone that black, someone with such dark skin. So the first step was to call him out in front of the class. Then we had a short sort of a trial, like a mock trial, where the victim gave her testimony, the witnesses gave theirs. The victim was a very bright young girl who, she was in tears from this incident, and she was internalizing this idea. And we had to, quickly shut that down. So the student was found to be guilty, and he had to pay a fine from his earnings. So in this case, the victim was already in a position of authority over the perpetrator. So we restored her to that role and gave her a little bonus for having to deal with such a difficult student. But finally, there has to be forgiveness. There has to be a way back for the perpetrators, where the student in that case could be praised for any good work that they did, even the same day. And that's so that they can leave behind that behavior rather than start to identify with it. We have to make sure that they don't start to think that that behavior is a part of who they are. Now, there were a handful of other incidents, but mostly the actions and punishments of a few perpetrators served as a lesson for all the other students. And no one wants to pay a fine. Now there are virtually no instances of bullying in the school. And it's a really harmonious learning environment. And we hope that means that as adults, they'll not tolerate that kind of behavior either. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mazen. I hope we'll be able to interact with you directly. There are lots of comments and questions. Now I'd like to introduce Dr. Eleanor Nwatanobi. I realize that we're pressed for time, but we really wanted to be able to present different aspects of the communication process and how that can lead to advocacy, action, and social policy changes. In this situation, we're going to talk directly about how the communication process leads to changes in social policy. Dr. Nwatanobi will discuss communication regarding the marginalization of widows of all ages worldwide due to harmful traditional practices, stigma, and discrimination. She'll focus on the transformation of community civil society conversations to advocacy platforms, leading to the development of social policy changes, resulting specifically in the Global Treaty to End Violence Against Women and Girls. Dr. Nwatanobi, who is the president of the Medical Women's International Association. She's joining us from Abuja, Nigeria. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Holly, and my thanks to the Global NGO Executive Committee and the Department of Global Communications. I'm just going to dive straight in on, highlighting, as Holly has said, a harmful traditional practice that occurs in parts of Africa and mostly in the southeast of Nigeria, for which I've been working on for 25 years. With the pandemic of COVID, we do now have a pandemic within a pandemic because of violence against women and girls more broadly. And when you look at the intersecting pandemic of what we have been talking about regarding communication and information that is either fake or false. So what's the situation with harmful traditional practices? And it is on widows of all ages, where they are stigmatized. This resonates very much with what Mazin has been talking about, where they're marginalized, stigmatized, accused of being witches, and therefore going through harmful traditional practices like the forceful shaving of hair, for example, having being disinherited from their property and being kept at arm's length. Thankfully, due to the work that we have been doing through local and national laws, the more horrific practices like forcing the widows, to drink the bath water in which their husbands' remains had been washed in, are being phased out. So that's the usefulness of change of law and communication, especially sensitization. So people have always looked at widows in the context of the elderly, but we do have a situation of another harmful practice, which is child marriage. And because of child marriages, it then means that if a child loses her husband, that child becomes a child widow. And sadly, we do have, especially in the northeast of Nigeria, a conflict that has been raging since 2009, which is the Boko Haram conflict. The world, stood still when there was the large-scale abductions of the Chibok girls, and the global community rallied round. But what you found there was that you found young girls who were abducted, and the abductions had actually started a long time before and have continued since. But the fact that these young girls were in a part of our geography where girls going to school is a challenge, and these are girls who had managed to get into school, and they were in their boarding school and they were taking their exams, and over 200 of them were abducted in one night. Now, what you have is in a situation where with the Boko Haram conflict, if we had young girls who had been married early and widowed early as a result of a Boko Haram attack, if they were then forcefully married by their Boko Haram captors, and if during the war, we have the soldiers now attacking the Boko Haram soldiers, it now meant that a child widow would be widowed again. And then you would then have that layered widow, as we call them, a child widow, widowed, more than once. And if she comes back with a child, you then find that that child is called bad blood. And you would think that the family would welcome and support the child. Unfortunately, because of the stigma of being a Boko Haram wife, those are issues one is grappling with. Then we do have now a situation where we are seeing a trend globally, where sadly, COVID-19 is affecting men more. We're having more fatalities. That means we have more widows. So here let's now move very quickly to the rural poor and what happens with communication for them. In the course of my work with widows in the southeast of Nigeria, we then found out that, you know, these are people who are so poor that they are less likely to own a smartphone. So yes, the NGO itself can participate in the types of communication that we've been talking about earlier in the session, and talking about Facebook and social media, but the rural poor have their challenges. I am able to talk to you now because I have been able to put diesel in my generator. Where I am in Abuja at the moment, we've had a power outage since last night. So you can, and I am living in the city. So you can imagine what's happening to the rural poor. So for a widow, for example, who manages to have a phone, she's less likely to have a smartphone. And therefore, she's less likely to communicate in the ways that we have been talking about. But there is a way around this. What we were able to do was to get those who do have smartphones to be able to have the widows congregate because they band together. However, with the lockdown situation, communication was affected because they're banding together, coming together to discuss their coping strategies was now no longer possible. And you also found that there are issues just like I am having with the electricity outage, and then data. Data is needed for social media. So the traditional system for communication in the villages where we work is what is called the town announcer. Previously, they were called town criers, but we've dispensed with that word now, and they're called town announcers. And they are very, very useful in the communities. So we were able to send out life-saving health information around COVID and prevention regarding what the widows and those in the community needed to do through the town announcers, telling them about maintaining hygiene, talking about washing of hands, remembering very much that in some of these areas, water is an issue. So for some of them, going to the stream to fetch water, the program that I run, we were able to set up a water system with an overhead tank and a well to be able to pump the water. So I'm just bringing to the fore some of the realities on ground. Now, crisis is an opportunity for creativity. The program, in the way that it was designed, was looking at the full value chain for widows who had their palm trees. They would be able to go to the mill, they would be able to crush their palm oil and then take that to the markets. But we were able to very quickly, through communication, ensure that through the lockdown, they could safely conduct their business through the palm oil mill in a way that they could still sell their palm oil to the local communities. Language is hugely important. When we have several languages, over 200 languages in Nigeria, and within those languages, we have dialects. So I'll give a very quick example as a physician. We had a situation where a woman was in labor and a particular midwife was speaking in her dialect, wanting the woman who was in labor to push. But she was speaking a different language, and rather than push, the lady in labor, who it was her first baby, understood the language. Instead of push, she was laughing because the word that was being used in Igbo was chia. Chia in one dialect is push, in another language it's laugh. And she thought that laughing was the method with which her baby would come out. She had to get the help of another nurse who spoke the dialect of the lady in labor, the patient, to be able to say in her dialect it's not chia, but it's nya. And she was eventually able to, comply with the midwife's wishes. Another thing that happens here with communication is, in order to communicate with some of the widows, there's a system that we use called flashing. Flashing in one language means something else, but for us it means send me a missed call and I'll know that you have a challenge and I can then respond to you. So somebody gives you a missed call, so you say, flash me, and I will call you back. That way, the cost of the call is on myself and not on the person calling me. The messaging has to be consistent, and we have to make sure that the voices are inclusive. So in our messaging, we are talking to the widows, talking about widows who are living with disabilities, talking to widows who may have been stigmatized. I'll tell a very quick story about, one of the young girls that was in the Boko Haram camp, and she was rescued. And whilst she was in the internally displaced persons camp, she said that she was not feeling well looked after. And when questioned further, she said in the Boko Haram camp, she was given a phone. So she felt empowered because her captors had given her a phone. And she was 14 and wanted to go back to the camp of captivity just for a phone. So that shows us that when it comes to governance and development and inclusiveness, sometimes it's something as little as a device with which one can communicate with others. It's hugely important that respect and confidentiality is employed in the work that one does. So what's the solution? For these types of violence against women and girls that I have described, I wear another hat as the founding co-chair on the steering committee of the Every Woman Treaty. The Every Woman Treaty is a coalition made up of members from all over the world calling for a global treaty to end every form of violence against women and girls, some of which we have spoken about today. And it's quite simple, using what has been proven to work before. And these are ensuring that we have the laws. So for example, working on widows' rights, it's because we worked at the local laws that the practice of making women drink the water in which their husbands' remains had been bathed stopped. It is not yet uhuru. We have not gotten to where we want to be, but some of the more dehumanizing practices have decreased due to the change in laws. There also needs to be training of responders to violence. It is hugely important that the training, very much like the sorts of training we are benefiting from today, for doctors, nurses, lawyers, judges, the police who respond to violence. The services need to be available. So we need hotlines. Communication is important, but how does someone call a hotline if they don't even have a phone with which to call? But if they're able to flash you and say, I'm in trouble, because in the lockdown, we all know that violence against women and girls, especially sexual violence, increased exponentially. So we need the services. We need to be able to have shelters. We need coded languages, coded language, so that in some countries where a woman who has been violated can walk into a pharmacy and ask for a red mask, then that's a red flag. We need prevention education. Again, communication is what will be used for prevention education. Again, the sorts of what we heard Mazin talk about, so that, and his wife, making sure that there is respect and dignity of humans for humans within humanity. So prevent the violence from happening. Let there be respect for all, not minding the color, the creed, etc. That can only happen, finally, if there is ring-fenced and dedicated funding. Therefore, we must advocate for this global treaty, because it's the same way we had the tobacco treaty that shifted the narrative from it is my right to smoke to a different narrative that said it is my right to breathe clean air. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe that a time will come with a global treaty when our great-grandchildren will say, do you mean there used to be a time when women and girls were violated in this manner? Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation. I'd like to now open the floor up to questions, comments, and interactive discussion. Each of our presenters has, I think, inspired each of us to make change where we are, where we can, by using communication methods from basic to highly sophisticated. So we have many questions here. Let's see, if you use the raising hand function, I think that would be helpful. Who would like to start?
Hi, Holly. This is Rose. If there isn't any other comments, I'd like maybe Doreen to talk more about what she wrote in her love letter to her white friends.
Yeah, please share that. We just have a couple of minutes though, so it can't be too long. And we'd very much like to have that as part of our resources. We've included resources for all of you that will help facilitate our understanding of each of these scenarios.
Thank you, Holly. I'll be as brief as I can. Okay. The love letter basically shared from a very visceral space in my life, my experiences, so that I could help people who thought they knew about my experiences to understand how different they were from what the perception was. So that was a starting point, is to have them understand. And also the love letter included specific recommendations and tools that they can use to start the conversation. Because frankly, when I got feedback from a number of people, they said they were so happy that I outreached to them because they had no idea how to begin the conversation and how they could do something different to help address the issues. Okay.
I think that what touched me when I first heard about this was how important it was to communicate our experience with each other. And that seems so basic, but a step that we often just miss. And communicating the nature of each of our own experiences with someone in a way that promotes understanding, I think is exceedingly important.
Thank you for that, Holly. And that is extremely important. And I thought about that as Eleanor was speaking, because that is why I presented some definitions at the beginning, because often when we are speaking to each other, you have a different thought of what a word may mean, or what a posture may mean. And unless you get on the same sheet of music, things are not communicated properly and the messages become convoluted.
I'm wondering if some of our youth participants would like to make some comments. We have many young people here, and I'm wondering if any of them would like to share their thoughts about some of these issues and communication issues that you're confronting. Isatoa Shamsu, a young leader of youth-led NGO, African Students for Interfaith Tolerance. Would you like to share some of your thoughts with us? Oh, I'm sorry, that person had to leave quickly, sorry. But if in the chat line, there's an email address so we can correspond. Doreen, Colonel Hurt, it seems like people of color, especially Black people, bear the burden of educating others about racism. How can white people join the dialogue and take some of that burden away from people of color without drawing attention away from or minimizing the experiences of people of color? When this great publicity began, and there were so many conversations with my friends and colleagues as people of color, they were, as you alluded to, almost considered experts. And the one phrase that I heard from them over and over again was the same one you used: I'm exhausted. I'm just exhausted. I don't speak for, my people, I just speak for myself. But I think that's an excellent question in terms of how can white people share the burden of education and information.
You can start by being honest. And that's what I said in number one, is you have to acknowledge that there's a problem. If you are a white American living in the United States of America, there are privileges that you have without doing anything. Just waking up in the morning before your feet hit the floor, you're given the benefit of the doubt. That is not the case for African Americans. We don't get that. And so you have to claw your way to have opportunities and to improve your life every day, because there are assumptions that are made about you before you say a word. And so I would say the first step is to really be honest. If you live in this country, you can't not have some sense that maybe things are wrong, because African Americans and other people of color have been talking about it for hundreds of years. This isn't new news. So be open to the fact that maybe what your experience is not what other experiences are, and be willing to get educated, but don't count on Black folks to educate you. Go out and get your education so that you can be a tool for change, an instrument of change. Thank you.
I think this is one of the ideas that we had in having this very creative and different form of a workshop, in that we wanted the process to begin with self-awareness and self-assessment. And that's another reason why we wanted to envision this as a series, not a one and done kind of situation. So we're encouraging each of us to begin or continue a process of self-examination and awareness that doesn't end with this workshop or any other, but that starts every day in terms of understanding our own privilege, our own less obvious areas of misunderstanding. And as NGO leaders, a good hard look in what we might be communicating without a clear intention to discriminate, but that might be happening. I wonder, Rich, and maybe Katrina, if you could talk a little bit about your NGO and your response as an NGO in the beginning of the pandemic, but also the beginning of the controversy around racial issues, and your assessment of your own NGO and board in terms of those practices. Could you share some of that with us?
Sure, we would be happy to do that. I think that Delton had a question first. He was in line there. And so why don't we hear from him, and then Katrina and I will pick it up after that.
Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's not really like a question. I'm Delton. I'm originally from Liberia, but I live in the US. And I'm going to school. I'm actually studying computer information science with focus in cybersecurity. And I have observed a lot of biases when it comes to, focusing on international students who pursuing degrees in this area compared to the typical white student in the classroom. And also, I play soccer, so sometimes when I go on a soccer field, I have seen a lot of friends, white friends, friends from Asia, calling me a lot of different names and referring to me as apes and things like that. Something that I would not really look at them and be able to say to them. And these are all like something more of racism. I've also observed within the typical Black community in the US, you're not coming from outside of the US, but from my own observation, I even believe that people who directly come from Africa like us, we have a little bit of privilege compared to the typical Black communities in the US. I feel most of their lives here is just more about a lot of them that I have been able to talk to interact with, and know what they've been up to since they started knowing themselves. It's just going between going into prison, coming out, and another time they've been prison for some reason. And I think most of their lives is just surrounded around being incarcerated and a lot of things like that. And at the end of the day, a lot of them grow up and they barely have skills, and they almost like lost everything. And I think these are all like my observation about it. And yeah.
Thank you very much. It's important for us to hear that and take that seriously. Thank you. We hope that your stay here improves very much. Rich?
All right, Katrina, you want to start?
Sure. Holly, I believe your question was, how did ACA respond to some of the most recent crisis that has happened in the last few months? Well, we knew that we would immediately have to make an official statement. Being a professional society, our members and people on the outskirts of our membership, they look to ACA for guidance. They look to us to see what we are saying about certain situations. So we knew we would need to prepare a statement first off, so that everyone knew where ACA stood on these issues and what we were prepared to do to answer the call that this moment is asking from all of us. And I'll let Rich talk a little bit about how that process happened with actually developing the message, because he worked very closely with the governing council to get that done. But when it came to me and my team and how we had to make sure that we had the message out there on all of our channels, after we put the statement up on our website, we definitely want to make sure that all of our members and followers could see it in different ways. We did a dedicated email about our Black Lives Matter statement. We also made sure that we put it in our newsletters, and that in the newsletter, everything linked back to our original statement. And of course, we had quite a few social media posts, not just about our statement, but also giving our audience resources that could help them help them navigate through the crisis.
I think also what I'd like to hear is how, as an organization, you began the process of intensive self-awareness to be able to assess and identify areas in which the organization might need to reevaluate or become more aware. We're talking about doing that as individuals in an ongoing way. And I think we'd all be interested in how you did that as an organization. Because I remember, Rich, you were very involved in that process when it was happening.
Right. So, part of it is in terms of the counseling profession, because multiculturalism and diversity is such a key component, that we knew we were going to address the issue. That part wasn't a problem. It was getting a little deeper with people and trying to understand that it wasn't just some scholarly or academic discussion, but that it was going to impact and affect everyone, because it does affect everyone. So we knew that the board was going to have to do something. We knew that we were going to have to do something on staff. And what came out was that the systemic racism that belongs and is part of the profession itself needed to be addressed. So it was a tall order. And, we are fortunate. We have a good board who felt strongly that something had to be done. I will tell you, Katrina can tell you, our first statement was okay, but it wasn't really as strong as it needed to be. And so we followed up with a second statement, and the board said, we have to have an action plan that goes with this. We have to have steps that will start to address it both short-term and long-term. And so they formed a group that would do that. And they worked really fast because everybody knew that this was a key moment in time. That, yes, we could sit there and say, oh, this is terrible and all this has happened. But they also knew that this was a moment when we could capture it and take some real action and make some real change. And I think that just as we heard from all of our panelists just now, and we're so grateful for all the work that all of you are doing, it's trying to figure out how do you raise awareness and increase growth, and again, look at how do you engage people. And from Doreen's really very personal story to invite people into courageous conversations, or when Mazen shared the Akshar Foundation video. So that video was just shown to people in 25 different countries, because that's how many people are on this call. And then what Eleanor talked about in terms of the oppression and stigma on women, it is that NGOs are able to elevate and amplify the voice of those who don't have one. And that's a responsibility we all need to take forward. And that's what we did in our association relative to anti-racism. So that's just a small sort of example of what we did and how impacted I think that we all are by this.
Thank you. And I think it's the hope of the executive committee to serve as a liaison among all of the NGOs affiliated with the Department of Global Communications, so that we can share information, we can share knowledge, we can share experiences that again will elevate and amplify the voices of all the peoples of the world, so that we're working together in harmony to improve situations through communication on every level for all the people of the world. Eleanor, we're getting some questions about how people can participate in disseminating information about the treaty. And I wonder if you'd like to share some details about that.
Yes, indeed. Quite simply, the website is everywoman.org. And we are, we would like you to sign up to the People's Treaty. The treaties are usually drafted by nation states, but we have what we call the People's Treaty, where for 7 years we looked at every single type of violence against women and girls. These types of violence can be appropriately dispensed with, because what we are looking for is zero tolerance for any type of violence. It was during our 7-year work that we heard, for example, about breast ironing, a situation where in parts of Cameroon, to stop Boko Haram from abducting young girls, their own parents are heating stones and putting on the breasts of girls at the time of puberty so that their breasts don't develop. So we do have the People's Treaty, which is like a zero draft of what we would love to see in a treaty. And unless we have a global binding norm of this nature to which every nation state will sign up to, then that's the only time we can get rid of these immensely dehumanizing practices around the world. So please go to everywoman.org, sign up for the People's Treaty, volunteer to be a voice. Just like Rich said, be a part of us. And Katrina, honestly, several tips assist us in really making sure voices in a way that we will be that lighthouse in this deep and dense fog that has descended upon us. When you see the exponential rise, I get emotional regarding violence against women and girls in the context of COVID. That's why we were the first to say that this is a pandemic within a pandemic, because before the viral pandemic, we had a situation of 1 in 3 women and girls who had undergone one form of violence or the other. And that's a pandemic right there. And then in the lockdown situation, women and girls were locked in with their abusers. And there was an exponential rise that caused the United Nations Secretary General himself to put out a clarion call for a ceasefire. And when you talk of a ceasefire, it means that you're referring to the act as a war. So he called what is happening to women and girls behind the closed doors of lockdown a war by calling for a ceasefire. So please, thank you for that question, and do come on board. Quite simply again, repetition is for emphasis, everywoman.org, and I'll put it in the chat box. Thank you.
Are you planning to present this at the UN or to the General Assembly or, any of the UN meetings coming up in the fall?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In every forum possible, we've started presenting, and we want, everyone possible to be able to add their voice to this. If we can get this out on social media, let's have that clarion call. And we are looking for that very first nation state that will have the courage to get up amongst the peer nation states, whether it's at the UN General Assembly, at the Human Rights Council, to say the time has come for this to end. Let me quickly tell you a story. I have a friend who is a Vietnam veteran, and he tells the story of, in those days, he used to line up with his sandwich bag to get a cheap ticket, and the cheap tickets on a plane always made sure that you sat at the back of the plane. And he told me, he said, Eleanor, guess what? Who else was at the back of the plane with people like me who bought cheap tickets? He said, you had women and children, so mothers with their children, and you had smokers. Now, can you believe that we were sitting down at a meeting in Rwanda and telling a young girl in her 20s this story? And she was astounded. She said, you mean people used to smoke in planes? And my friend said, yes, indeed. So we want our grandchildren and great-grandchildren to ask with great shock and surprise, you mean there was a time women and girls were violated in these terrible ways? Because you and I would have added our voices to ensure that no longer will we see violence against women and girls, and no longer will perpetrators wander around without being punished. Let's break the silence around violence.
That each of us from our respective NGOs utilize some of the important lessons we learned today in terms of social media, both personally and professionally, to publicize this among maybe some other ideas that we've developed during the morning, but to put on whatever social media we choose, repeatedly, not just today, information about this treaty and how people can sign on and what they can do. There was a question about Mazin's program, the Akhtar Foundation, and why that can't be replicated throughout the world. And that's what they're planning to do. They're already in negotiations with governments throughout India, even the US and UNICEF. And we can publicize that website and that information and share it with all of our professional and personal social networks. And if we use today as a kickoff, it'll be exciting and really productive to see what we can create in terms of the aspirational goals of the SDG and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I'd like to refer to again as the recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equality and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, which is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world. So we've heard some very different experiences and ways to communicate in courageous conversations that are really transformational. But I think we'll all agree that what we have in common is being members of the human family. And if we move forward to use the skills and resources that we've had the advantage of today to enhance the quality of life for the entire human family, not just right now, but as Eleanor pointed to, in the future, for future generations, I think we will have really accomplished something important and meaningful despite the obvious disappointments and challenges. So with that, I think we can close the session unless there are any other comments. And I'd like to call on Fanny Mullen to see if Fanny, as chair of the executive committee, if there's anything else that you'd like to add before in closing.
I'm here, Holly, can you hear me?
Yes, Rich, can you help us see her? Can your team?
Right.
Or shall we just listen?
We can do that. We can listen too.
Okay. Fanny? There you are.
Okay. First of all, I want to give my appreciation and gratitude to all of the participants. And it was a very informative conversation. I would like to have a copy of Colonel Durant's 10 points. I think they were accurate. I related to many of the things that she said in those 10 points. I will tell this brief story. My great-great-grandmother, my mother's mother, was a slave. And I was very young, and she lived to be 114 years old. And I just slightly remember what she said, how cruel slavery was. And I also would like to make a statement about the organization that I represent at the United Nations. It's the National Council of Negro Women. And the founder was Mary McLeod Bethune. And she founded the first college for African-American girls in Daytona Beach, Florida. My organization has been in the forefront for civil rights and human rights since its inception. And Mary McLeod Bethune was in San Francisco in 1945. And she sent back a letter to all members of the organization stating that all mechanisms developed by the United Nations must have a place for persons of color. And that statement has stayed with me in my organization and our members all our lives. And that's what we work for, human rights. And I agree completely that we must start to talk about how we dismantle racism and how we come to an understanding that we are all the same in the eyes of God. So I appreciate this meeting. I think it was very informative. And I have learned some things, and I do think that we all need to talk. And talk, I like to talk. Talk is good. But it's our responsibility to reach out. And if we don't understand, ask questions. You can never ask the wrong question. The question that is wrong is the question that's not asked. So I appreciate you all, and thank you very much. And have a good day. And we will beat the coronavirus. I know.
Thank you. We would just like to, before we close, make sure that we thank the DGC team who have been instrumental. Hawa, Crystal, Swati, Victoria, they have worked really, I've been collaborating with them since the pandemic hit about a variety of issues, and they haven't missed a beat. They've worked tirelessly, and we owe you a great deal of gratitude. To Dr. Cardarelli and Colonel Hurt, to Mazen Mukhtar, and to Dr. Eleanor Nwansnobi, we are deeply grateful, not just for your participation in this session, but also for your unceasingly work for decades about issues that are so important. And we want to remind you that we have 2 more sessions in this series coming up. The next session will be in mid-August, and the date will be posted, and that will focus on creating accurate, contemporary, relevant information to disseminate among our professional networks. And the following session will focus more on a follow-up of dealing with these difficult issues, starting with courageous conversations and transforming them into social action. We do appreciate your feedback. As you can see, there is a survey. We'd like to use your comments and sentiments to shape some of the following programs. So please let us know what you're thinking, what information you're wanting from us, and what kinds of things you'd like to be sharing among each other so that we can effectively include everyone in our next programs and the planning. Thank you all so much for attending, for participating, and especially the DGC team for helping to provide our important resources to really make this happen.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rich.
Yes, and
Welcome.
Rich's team who's managed the
Katrina is the greatest. We need, I Katrina is fantastic.
I know that.
Absolutely. Here, here.
We need her. We need her here.
Yeah,
I concur.
Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Holly.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
Holly. Take care.
Conversation's going.
All right.
Bye.